With just a couple of days left in 2023, I've managed to find some time to scour the world in an attempt to bring you the best and most innovative pieces of public art that have been created in the last 12 months. We're going to be looking at the dirty graffiti, the sexy murals, the DIY, the institutional, and the work that refused to let us turn our backs on injustice. So join me right now for 2023, a year in street art. My name's Doug. You're watching Fifth Wall TV. As with every year, 2023 has had absolutely no shortage of seeing genuinely exceptional pieces of art being created. But I'm going to be honest with you, it's caught me in a little bit of a weird place, lost between seeing these amazing pieces of art being created and how I actually feel about the scene as a whole at the moment. In news that will come as absolutely no surprise to anybody, the dominant form of art in public spaces continues to be murals. The people love them, Instagram loves them, the funders love them, and it might not sound like it at the moment, but I do still love them when they're done great. The quality of talent that now exists on the circuit is like nothing we've ever seen before. Straight off the top, the Argentinian artist Bossoletti is at the top of his game. The way that his work continues to evolve makes me feel like he's actually in it. The Portuguese artist Ricardo Romero dropped some absolute gems this year. I think few are touching where the artist Zor is at the moment. The continued evolution of his form is just so refreshing for the scene. It's also really telling when an artist goes from their sort of graffiti pseudonym back to their real name. When I see the continued success of festivals like Crystal Ship, Wool, New Art Aberdeen, and the waves of support that are coming from the new ones like Look Up in Portsmouth, it should be clear that this is just going one way. Murals are here to stay. Art like this is well on its way to becoming omnipresent in the urban environment the same way that music is. Each and every one of us deserves to have a bit of colour and creativity in our lives, and it is so well documented the numerous positive effects that art has on our mental health and well-being. And that fact alone trumps absolutely everything else that I'm about to say. As a whole, it does feel like the culture, like street art, is pretty homogenized at the moment. While I'm showing you what I believe to be the absolute best of the best, as an art fan walking around certain spaces, it does feel like we've hit this point where the art in the public space kind of does actually feel like music in a shopping mall. It's not really doing anything, it's just there. If I'm being brutally honest, which I usually am, a lot of it feels kind of directionless.
Something fun to do here in Idaho. And guess what? It's absolutely free. Rhonda Blake Kazir sent us these photos. If you're traveling through Horseshoe Bend, be sure to get your photo taken with these new angel wings.
I think this might be why I've been so drawn towards abstraction this year. There's something about the unsettled nature of the deconstructed form that maybe just feels kind of reflective of the uncertainty that so many of us are feeling with the world right now. I like this invitation to explore thoughts and feelings in a way that feels genuinely different, and it doesn't feel as loaded with the same kind of emotional manipulation that exists in other forms. I think maybe that there's just a little less risk out there at the moment. I'm not talking about graffiti here because it's out doing its own thing, but when I think about street art, it just feels a little safe. We were all promised that during times of uncertainty, culture would be pushed into new and exciting, challenging spaces. And I'm not too sure that's materialized within street art.
This vibrant neighborhood has become a sought-after destination for real estate investors and must-visit place for all tourists.
It genuinely fills me with excitement when I see artists like Amperito or Octavi Serra get weird and conceptual with their ideas. Amperito using the sun's reflection to abstract statues was as bold and informed as any museum-led piece of public art. And watching artists like Spy continue to take over these institutional spaces feels really important in the validation of street art as an art form. When I think about what street art culture at its core represents, it's about taking risks, it's about innovation, it's about pushing and challenging new ideals. But the continued dominance of big money investments and advertising has taken up so much of the culture now, it's hard to picture a time where things go back. London is a city that was once at the epicenter of this ideal, But if I'm entirely honest, it feels like there's absolutely no form of street art culture left in the city. But as a whole, I don't think London's art scene has been this strong in well over a decade. New galleries are appearing there every single week. Places like Guts, Rose Easton, Ojiri, Musi, the Plot Residency are all harnessing this wave of talent and taking it around the world. Now, art in a gallery setting will never hit the same way that it does for me as when I see it in the street. But the scene as a whole is absolutely jumping right now, and it feels diverse, young, inclusive, representational. All the things that street art is supposed to be. This might just be me entering my boomer era, but when I went to see the Philip Guston show at the Tate this year, it was showcasing an artist that was painting murals challenging white supremacy and the KKK back in the 1930s. The streets could do with those voices now more than ever. For me, mural work is always at its strongest when the artists are a vehicle for something bigger, rather than being the focal point themselves. Saipei's response to the earthquake that ripped out areas of Turkey and Syria used art to help raise money for relief. Indonesia's Splash and Burn also made a return this year, with a series of art activations aimed at promoting legislative change to protect the right to clean air. And Mumbai's START project continues its efforts to promote social and environmental awareness through its curation. The standout this year from START though was this one from the Spanish collective Las Interruptus. The plastic we live in repurposed 8,000 plastic bags donated by local residents and businesses, which then formed this overflowing effect through a guest house. Lit up, it looked absolutely lit. They did dump all the plastic bags in a nearby river though, which I thought was problematic. I'm only joking, they did not do that.
If you like police, you're going to love this exhibition.
It wouldn't be my end of year review without covering the wheres and whereabouts of street art's biggest name. It was a quietly understated year for Banksy this year. On one hand, he seemed to keep a relatively low profile. On his Instagram, he's only claimed 3 street pieces in the whole of 2023. The jury's still out on this one being a 4th though. That almost feels strange considering he's had his biggest solo exhibition since Dismaland. Cut and Run at Glasgow's Museum of Modern Art was an intimate look behind the curtain of street art's most enigmatic troublemaker. A far cry away from the culture-shattering shows like Barely Legal or Dismaland, Cut and Run was Banksy at his most honest and sober. Just for clarity, I'm not insinuating in any way that Banksy has a drinking problem.
That shout was perfect, man. That was...
Help me!
This might be the most tenuous link I've ever made on this channel, but just stick with me for a second. If any of you listened to the last album or saw the headline performance by Arctic Monkeys, I kind of see similarities in where they are in their careers at the moment. Both have had 2 decades of dropping absolute chart-topping bangers, and I think they've both hit that point where they go, well, kind of what next? I've done that. Cut and Run might not have brought that same kind of energy, but you do have to appreciate where he is in his career at the moment. I continue my belief that at this point Banksy is more of a social experiment than he is an artist. For 2 decades he's watched the absolute chaos he creates when he makes work in the street, not to mention the way that he impacts people's lives. For better or worse. It's almost impossible for a work to just exist as a piece of art now. It has to be ripped down and sold off for profit. I kinda get the sense that the Banksy we know as the artist that tore up the rulebook and changed the game has kinda come to an end. I have to be honest with you, I kinda think that's okay. Look, it's Banksy, so I honestly wouldn't put it past him to prove me completely wrong here, but it does feel like a strange time for him. I think this position was at its most telling this year, not from anything he did do, but what he didn't do. Banksy has spent years talking about Palestine, and while the rest of the world has been making all this noise, he's been uncharacteristically quiet. When he did rework this stop sign into a ceasefire statement, it lasted less than an hour until it was taken down. By doing something as simple as trying to show solidarity for a ceasefire, he's now inadvertently made somebody else tens of thousands of pounds. So you kinda can't blame him if he is going through a bit of an identity crisis at the moment. Ukraine is still on its knees. There's genocide in Sudan. The Sahel is in crisis. The Venezuelan government are now galvanizing an invasion. But 2023 was defined by one conflict and one conflict only.
Israel caught off guard after the largest and deadliest escalation of violence in decades.
The Israeli military has continued its bombing of the Gaza Strip overnight, while heavy combat continues on the ground.
When Hamas militants tore through villages in a music festival this year on October the 7th, it was quite clear that this was going to be the start of something we have never seen before. The scale of death and destruction that we are continuing to witness is unprecedented, and the art world still looks like it's torn. If you say free Palestine or ceasefire now, you're accused of ignoring the historical trauma felt by the Jewish community. If you say free the hostages or I stand with Israel, you're ignoring the historical oppression faced by every single Palestinian since the Nakba. I think this heightened sensitivity and tribalism has made it quite hard terrain for the art world to navigate successfully, even though it should be very, very simple to call out injustice. And I think that's why large parts of the art world feel silent in a way that didn't exist with Black Lives Matter or Ukraine. While the gallery world might be leading the charge for ushering in new talent, it's certainly not going to be leading the charge in demands for peace.
There's no justification for this genocidal onslaught that is happening in Gaza.
Art Basel this year was largely void of any such conversation. There was a protest, but it didn't seem to get too much traction, and I did enjoy this little cheeky intervention from Bordalo.
Designers all around the world.
If there's one thing I've taken away from this year, it's that there's absolutely no substitute for collective action, and the Unmute Gaza project really reflects that. The images of photojournalists on the ground in Gaza have become accessible works of art that can be printed out and put up in the street. Anonymous actions that have kept the messaging simple and the focus on the subject. I'm not entirely sure why, but 2023 was quite a hard year to contextualize through art. Without question, we should be championing the spaces and projects that cultivate the kind of ephemeral, reflective forms of authentic street art that feel genuinely interesting. I've shown you just a small taste of what is currently being created out there. There are amazing artists that continue to push the boundaries, but I can't help but feel that in a world that feels so uncertain, why does street art currently feel so safe? I hope this video finds you all safe and well at the end of 2023, and I wish you all nothing but success for 2024. I'll be back with you at some point. Till then, my name's Doug. This was Fwtv.